About a week ago, Gung Ho and Nihon Falcon released a demo for Trails in the Sky First Chapter, and ultimately I had a good time with the demo. It contains about the prologue, which I'll explain more of how long that is, and I'll be going over gameplay analysis, my thoughts on the gameplay as a whole. Though I'm not going to go into any story stuff, I'm probably going to save that for a potential review of Trails in the Sky, so keep a lookout on there. But anyways, if you haven't yet, make sure you go on and hit that subscribe button. It's free, you might as well do it. And of course, I really do appreciate it. So as I mentioned previously, the demo contains about the prologue of Trails in the Sky. So that's about 10 to 20 hours if you're spending a lot of time talking to NPCs, taking in the dialogue, watching the cutscenes, and going through the adventure as normal, though if you go through it pretty quick, I would say about 5 hours. And much like many other Trails games, there are difficulty options to choose from, to which I chose the Nightmare difficulty. And I will say right now, the Nightmare difficulty is quite hard. There are points in time where I've had some game overs here and there, where I had to restart and change up my setups for my characters before going on and taking on a boss or a monster chest. So yeah, it's definitely hard. It's not like Daybreak 1 or Daybreak 2 where Nightmare was basically piss easy in a sense. It's actually quite hard. So if you're looking for a challenge, definitely go with Nightmare mode. And also, if you do go out your way and beat the demo, you can transfer that saved data from the demo itself over to the full game as well. Sorta wish Square Enix kept that practice for the Dragon Quest games, but it is what it is in that regard. Though aside from that, this is indeed a fully 3D remake of Trails in the Sky, to which the original game was the over-the-top isometric view with kind of Donkey Kong Country-like graphics, while this is a fully 3D remake using Falcom's newest engine, to which I believe is actually a tweak of their custom engine they made for Daybreak 1, Daybreak 2, Tai, and Ys 10. And this is more of a modification of that same engine. Though I'm not entirely sure on that, so if you guys want to correct me down in the comments below, let me know if this is just the same engine that they've been using previously since Daybreak 1, or this is a brand new customized engine that's based on the old engine. And surprisingly enough for me personally, I thought that they were going to keep a lot of the same level layouts from Trails in the Sky, though to my surprise, they actually went out their way and redesigned some areas, some dungeons here and there. They do keep their general layouts, but for the most part, not everything is the same. For example, some treasure locations are moved around here and there. Some dungeon layouts are completely different. Some path layouts, for example, going to the Malga Mines, feels completely different from how it was originally in the PC release and PSP version. So it's not a complete one-to-one level design from the original version just translated into 3D. There are some few tweaks here and there. And of course, most differently is the combat, to where the combat is essentially a combination of every single Trails game that you can think of, going from the original Sky game to the Crossbell games, to the Cold Steel games, and of course the Daybreak games. As you have the hybrid system Daybreak introduced, where half the game is combat, while the other half is turn-based. You also have chain attacks from the Cold Steel games, and also when you go out your way and stun enemies, it's a mix between Cold Steel and the Daybreak games. There are some few things here and there that the old Trails games have here and there that's in this version here, but not by much. And the Orbinus system is basically one-to-one to how it was originally in the Sky games. So yeah, in a way, this remake kind of celebrates every single combat system from the Trails games and tries to combine it into one thing, try to mash it all together, and in a surprising sense, it does work overall. Though, even then, a majority of the combat system definitely takes a lot from the Daybreak games because of the fact that you still have the hybrid system, you have special attacks when you're in the overworld, and then when you go out and do your turn-based combat, the way you move around is basically one-to-one to the Daybreak games. Though a lot of elements from the Daybreak games do not make their way over to Trails in the Sky First Chapter. For example, chaining attacks does not work how it does in the Daybreak games, to where you have to be right next to your party member to go on and chain attacks. It works more like Cold Steel, like I mentioned before. If you get a critical hit, you have a chance to go out and attack again or do a special attack. And a lot of these systems that Daybreak introduced are not here in the Sky remake, because the Orbinate system, like I mentioned before, works more like in the Sky games, which of course makes sense right there. But overall, I think the combat works just fine, though I do think I'm going to have to relearn myself again just simply because some few things here and there are changed from the Daybreak games. And of course, the combat system does take a lot from the Daybreak games. And now moving on, when it comes down to the main story and progressing in side quests and what have you, I'm not going to talk too much about that story-wise because like I said, I don't want to get into spoilers, and I do want to reserve that for a potential Trails in the Sky review. But a lot of the quality of life stuff that was introduced in the Cold Steel games and brought over in the Daybreak games were brought over to the Sky Remake. For example, making the right dialogue choices will net you extra BP, or performing a task the game wants you to do it will once again notify you you've gained that BP right then and there. So there's no guessing around and hoping by the end you collect all your rewards. By the end of it you get all the BP you need. The game will let you know right then and there that you got that BP right there. And when it comes down to the quests and everything like that, they basically are the same from the original game, just in 3D. And on top of that, you can now fast travel in the world as well, going to previous locations, and backtracking is definitely a lot more easier thanks to quick travel. Though if the game wants you to go from point A to point B without fast traveling, you will have to go out and trudge your feet from point A to point B. Which of course for me personally makes sense there, at least keeps some of that exploration that the game originally had without fast traveling. But hey, at least when you're doing side quests, you can now fast travel to your heart's content. Make things go by a little bit more quicker. And finally, there's a lot of things that the future Trails games had that were retroactively added into this remake. There's now an achievement system that gives you some set biff, some extra weapons, some ordnance slots, what have you. And also when you cook up recipes, you can actually choose between your party members of who you want to go on and cook up that recipe. And depending on who you choose, will affect how the recipe ends up. Plus there's also some smaller dungeons you can go out your way and explore, which weren't in the original release. Finally, when it comes down to the bonuses when you're going into turn-based battle, they actually now stack, which is pretty cool. Very helpful when you're trying to go out and grind set biff to unlock those ordnance slots. And those are my thoughts so far on the Trails in the Sky first chapter demo. So far, it's been a pretty good experience. A lot of the quality of life features that were introduced in later Trails games being brought over to this remake are a nice touch. And I do think the combat system is unique. Even though it takes a lot from the Daybreak games, it definitely stands on its own when you look at the minute detail. And I do think that they've redesigned enough areas to make the game feel different while at the same time similar in a sense. So yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to the September 18th release for Trails in the Sky first chapter, and hopefully you guys stick around for me to go out and review the game. Both the original and the remake, of course. But anyways, if you guys haven't yet, make sure you go out and like this video and comment down below, and if you haven't yet, click that subscribe button, and of course I make a bunch of videos on this channel, so check out those as well. I personally think you'll enjoy them. See you guys on the next one. Take care.